To kick off, as I suggested before we went out for a quick break, I'm delighted to be joined by a very close partner and client team from Nordea. I will let them do their introductions, but please welcome Jakob and Brian to the stage to give us a case study of their understanding and use of MetricStream. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that the clicker? Good. Hi everyone, my name is Jacob. I'm from Nordea, and with me today I have...
Yeah, Brian Sørensen, Nordea as well, by surprise.
Yeah. And for the next 30 minutes, there's a bit of a tone here I can hear. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to give you an introduction to our MetricStream journey, so to say. It started a few years back. It's been some good successes, but there's also been some learnings. So it's not going to be just a sales pitch. It's basically going to be the real deal that we will try to explain to you. Also, for those of you who have not embarked on this yet, so that you have an idea of also potentially what it takes. It's more than just putting in some technical stuff. But for those of you who don't know Nordea, I'm quite sure some of you are not familiar with us. We are a bank based in the Nordic. We have around 10 million customers. And we're a universal bank, and we're the biggest bank in the Nordic region. But today we're not going to sell you Nordea. Today we're just going to explain how we work with GRC. Yes. So a few years back we started on what we call IRMA. It stands for Integrated Risk Management Application. It's also the name of a Finnish elderly lady. And it's a Danish name for a supermarket chain of groceries of high quality, which is also one of the reasons that we picked the name, because it's in the Nordics, it's easy to remember, and everyone have this idea of either quality or a pretty strict lady. Both of them works pretty well for a risk system. So in 2020, ECB came by, and they did an on-site inspection on our compliance processes, and unfortunately, they were not super happy. Basically, they said that everything was rubbish. The people was rubbish, the systems was rubbish, the processes was rubbish, everything was bad. So we started to take a hard look on, how are we actually running things. For sure, we needed to change the way we worked. But it also gave us an opportunity to actually change some of the solutions behind, some of the technical things that we had behind it. And it also gave us an opportunity to actually review our non-financial risk processes as such. At that point in time, we had around 10 different systems scattered around the bank, and then hundreds of Excel sheets and SharePoint sites, etc. And the idea was basically to consolidate all of that into one enterprise application. We also decided that we wanted a common integrated data model. We wanted a cloud-based solution, which is now, I guess, pretty common, but at that point in time, in Nordea at least, it was not something we did. We struggled a bit with the US Cloud Act to find a way on how can we actually do an implementation of this, not violating the privacy policies of Europe. We also set out to go for an out-of-the-box solution, meaning no customization. No customization. So the idea was that instead of having the processes dictating the system, we wanted to turn that around and actually say the system is dictating the processes. One of the ambitions with that was that hopefully all of you is paying a lot of money to MetricStream to change their processes, and we can then benefit from it. That was part of the idea on what we did. The implementation of IRMA is a joint initiative. Brian and I, when we started this journey, was actually part of first line. We are now part of group risk in second line. Doesn't really matter. This is a three-line organization system that everyone needs to embark on. All 30,000 people will be part of the journey at some point or the other. So it doesn't really matter where you are, if you are group internal audit, compliance, or you're sitting in first line. You all have to be part of it. Good. But what was the starting point, Brian?
Yeah, exactly. As you can see here, we have a starting point and some phased kind of a approach to the implementation. And I would also say that, as Jakob mentioned, the ECB came by. Actually, we had this in the drawer. We could just pick it up and say, couldn't this be a good idea? And it fit. right? But our starting point was we were very much process-driven, like process by process. That was how the governance was set up. The structures were in place, but again, it was manually because you needed to move data between the different processes, and each process captured all the data they needed. So there was really no, I would say, interactions between them and utilization of those kind of things. And as you can see, there's like, 50 plus operational and reporting processes, each business area inventing their own on the basis of a common framework. So there was a lot of, I would say, time invested in all of this. We had 10 plus applications, like, some of them were homegrown. Some of them were GRC applications that we then customized over the years and couldn't get out of, if we can put it that way. Couldn't get them back to standardization. A lot of, user-developed application, Excel sheets, everything. The standard setup around how you actually do that. And that also means that on the people side, significant effort was put into this. And if you're looking around, the value of this was unclear. For people, there was checkbox exercises. We have to do this to be compliant. But what's the real value? So phase one, simplification. And I think that's actually what we're trying to address. And then we'll build on that to get us through to phase two at a later stage. So what we want to do is build on common capabilities instead of processes. And it comes a little bit back to it at a later stage, but risk assessments or controls, instead of embedded into each process, let's try to take that view across and try to govern it that way as well. Standardize. Use the same processes all over the enterprise so that we basically follow the same standards. We can govern this, how it's done. We want IRMA implemented. That means one application. We don't want all of these applications. They need to be decommissioned. Common reporting solution, also coming back to that, like it's been mentioned earlier here today, one database, one reporting, making sure we're actually all pulling on the same data source. Yep, and then of course we want to significantly reduce the efforts in first line and second line, etc., by doing all of this and trying to get some real business value into this and push for what this mantra is: we're all risk managers. So how can we move in that direction? So that's basically where we're focusing today. And then our next step, of course, will be to build on that at a later stage. I don't want to go too much into that, but this phased approach is actually what we're taking and how we are moving these things ahead.
So when we started, it was pretty clear to me, at least, that people saw this as an application development. And basically, you can do that in the corner of an organization. But if you actually want to change the entire organization, the way people work and think and act, then you need more than that. So we set up a steering committee. And in the steering committee, we have the head of audit, we have the head of compliance, we have the head of group risk, we have the representative from the COOs in the entire bank, we have the head of the management oversight, which is a business risk function in first line, and we had technology as well. That enabled us. So when we get an idea, if you want to change something, that steerco can actually make that decision and actually ensure that that is enforced throughout the entire organization. That also meant that when we started with the idea of the applications always win over the current processes, everyone was on board. That also meant that when we said there will be no adaptation to this, we will of course do the changes we can within the application, but we will not do any hard coding, then everyone was on board as well from the beginning. Program management, that's me, PMO, some good people helping. And then I set it up with two lieutenants, you could say. One is the IRMA application, which is headed by Brian, and he has a team of, I'm going to say 20, but it's that kind of range. And then we have what we call IRMA change management team. I'm going to come back to how these two teams work a bit later, but they are basically supporting the change and the adaptation of these new processes and new ways of working. Then we have a monthly operation committee. All the chief process owners from the bank is there, but we also have representatives from each business area in that operation group. What they do is that they are sounding board, but they are also where we get the resources. So if we need to do some changes, then they are the ones that we ask, and we test new ideas for them as well. And then we have some project management state meetings, and we have some work streams. It's basically a program where you then have sub-projects below. We have daily state-up meetings, etc. But there's also an existing governance, where you have framework owners, sub-risk committees, and risk committee. So if we actually want to do a change, for instance, on controls that no one owns in Nordea, or on reporting that no one owns in Nordea, or on issue and action management when we started, that no one owns. So when we actually want to fill out the gaps, then of course we need that organization that is already available in Nordea. So we're not detached from the organization. So we use this governance structure not only for an application purpose, but actually to improve the way we work with non-financial risk in Nordea completely. That is the idea, and what is we are doing as well.
Maybe put a few words on the application part before we move on, because I actually think that's a critical part of why we can do what we do at the moment, because this is not just, as Jakob said, there's around 20 people. So we do have our business analysts, who is the ones who's interacting with MetricStream, and we actually do our own configuration. So we are building an internal center of excellence here. We want to understand what we actually do. We want to understand the application. So we do this in-house. We have our own testing team as well, as we're moving things through the different environments and based on the configuration we do. We have our manual testers, we have test automation set up, we have our release manager. We have everything that's running as if it actually was software development. But we do this in order to be in control and understand what we actually do. And then it feeds over to the actual change management that Jakob is mentioning, where we then have different work streams who's running with the actual development of this. So we've built a kind of substantial organization to support this underneath the whole application setup here.
So what have we accomplished through the last few years? These are some of the points. Maybe, Brian, you will take us through them.
Yeah, I can take it. We started out in September 21 with the regulatory directory. So we, split that out with our, areas we're working, and that's like around 32,000 obligations we're ending up with when we broke that down. We had our CSA in March. We followed up with the compliance, and here we actually took a little bit look at this, because we started out with ORM and we started out with regulatory change management. You'll see that was eventually rolled out down here, the change part. But we took a look at this and said, okay, right now we're rolling it out like product by product. But due to that, we actually had our own team who started looking into this, and we saw, okay, we might actually be able to speed up the development here if we, instead of looking at it like product by product, actually look at capability by capability. So what we started to do here was to take, okay, we've rolled out RCSA, we have this, we can utilize that same functionality, which we then did on things like PFCs, which is here, further down, Principal Financial Controls, the equivalent of SOX, so to speak. So we actually rolled this one out, simply based on ORM, where we took what we had learned from risk assessment, control testing, and just added other libraries to that, but actually followed the same structure, and thereby being able to speed up the process, having bigger coverage on how to actually get this rolled out to a broader audience as such. I think it's also important that we actually rolled issue and actions out, and we rolled that out across all 3 lines of defense. So that meant when we actually went live here, it was first line issues, it was second line issues, it was audit issues. All of it rolled out at the same time with the migration. So that when first line go in and have to work with issues and actions, they already now do that in IRMA. So when we at a later stage actually implement audit, compliance monitoring, the issue flow is already there. First line knows how to work with this. It feeds into a known process for them. So all of that is already embedded into the organization, which also means that we have a substantial number of users already on the application. I think we're around 4,000 right now. We also do version upgrades. And you will also see that in the next slide. We will do a version upgrade every year. So here we did a version upgrade from Arno to Colorado, and we will also go on Euphrasia in the beginning of the new year. So principle is we will do that annually in order not to get too far behind and keep, up the pace of all of this. We have something down here because there are some spin-offs on these common capabilities, and when we're discussing things in IRMA, one of them is reporting that has been mentioned before. EMA reporting, that's good. We needed to find a solution for that. But when we started looking at reporting, why would we only look at it from an EMA perspective? So we actually made a spin-off, and what we're looking at now is creating a common reporting solution for the entirety of non-financial risk management. So we are putting the EMA data into our common data platform. And then on top of that, we are building this reporting solution where we then also create the setup so that we can pull in data from other sources and then have one reporting unit. So it started out as an EMA initiative focusing on this, but instead of spending our energy on just doing it for EMA, well, we'll do it for the whole setup. Would you put the words on iSupport, maybe?
Yeah, I can. I think that you mentioned it, but the idea was that when we saw this, then there came in loads of questions. And I just thought that instead of having that going to process owners and then people not understanding, is this a technical question or is this a process question? And in the beginning, people were just blaming each other. We were blaming the process people and the process people were blaming us. And I thought, instead of just being in this blame game, we might as well just take it, actually. And that's why we created what we call iSupport. And it is a front-end tool that basically every question you have, regardless if it's on RCSA, it's on GIA, it's on compliance, it filters through the same front end. What we're now looking into is what we call iReport, which is basically changing the way we do reporting for everything related to non-financial risk, including, of course, the stuff that is in EMA, but also stuff that is in other systems. It could also be organizational data, etc., that we need to subtract. And that also means that we'll get better data governance, which is a pretty high thing on the agenda for us at the moment. I just want to mention also that the decommissioning part is actually pretty important. In Nordea, we are lousy in decommissioning. Most of our units think that they are like small snowflakes, that they need their own application set up in their own way, etc. And that means that when we want to do the decommissioning, it's really goddamn hard and no one wants to play a role. So, and they're all going to come with this cost thing. Oh, it's never going to be a cost solution. The business case is not there, etc. What we did was that we had one application in our team. We had two, but one of them, we decommissioned that one application. And that one application have paid for everything else. So when we now go to group finance and say, hey, you know, your financial controls, you should decommission your system and come join us. And then they're saying, yeah, but the cost will be zero. We're going to take all the cost, we're going to do all the service, everything is being done by us. Zero cost.
And today you're sitting with application ownership that we will take over as well, because there will just be one application.
We take all the complexity, all the frontline support, everything. And that's basically how we roll it out. So every time we go out, we're basically coming with a gift instead of being an annoyance. There's only two things that they have to remember. We decide. So they have to follow by the way that we want to play this. I'm going to come back to that part. And then the application decides, not the process. Good. Next one should just show you an overview of...
just what's up, if you can put it that way, right? If you remember what we talked about, like being assessment, audit, risk assessment, we're using it, audit is actually coming later. Observations, we said that we are all risk managers. We want to do something around observations, bringing it out to the frontline users so that they can actually be part of this. KRIs, we will also be looking in so we can start building on that. We'll do some basic solutions. But as you can see, we have a quite substantial agenda that we need to deliver on, but we've actually managed to deliver quite a bit historically as well. So I think we're on a good track. We already decommissioned 2 tools. We have implemented the processes so that we can decommission this one down here by the end of the year as well. So on track on those items as well.
So this was a lot of talk about application and technology. But actually the main concern for us have not been on the technology part. We launched 5 different processes in the first half year. All 5 were delayed, none of them due to technical reasons. Anyone knows where this picture is from? And what it is?
Yeah.
Correct. This is a picture from 67. It is the day where the Swedes started to drive in the right side of the lane. And of course, you should think that when looking at that picture, you should think, oh, maybe they didn't know. Maybe it was a surprise to them. that this happened. But actually it wasn't. 5 years before this picture was taken, there was actually a law that said we're now going to move and do the rest, well, not here in England, but the rest of us is doing right side of the lane. And then a year before this picture was taken, then they started doing marketing. So that means like advertising. They even had this song about, hey, your son that needs to drive in the right side of the lane. You know, all the school kids needs to understand that instead of looking, left first, you need to look right first. All of these small behavioral things that you need to do to make sure that you're up and running. 48 hours before this picture was taken, all roads in Sweden were closed. They changed all the signs. They all have to be reversed. Everything has to change. But still, Monday morning, Jesus Christ, what am I doing? People are confused. Change is difficult. Even though that you have the best communication team in the world, it's difficult. We have done a lot. We've done commercials, like internal movies. We have had ambassadors. We have had all the things that you need to run a technical official change management. And I worked a long time as an external consultant on change management as well. And still, we have failed tremendously in our process. What we do is we set it up in 3 different phases. It's super simple. We have a startup phase, an implementation phase, and an anchoring phase. And then we look at people, we look at processes, and we look at technology. And that's it. Then we have a concept called the stick and the carrot. The stick looks like this. It's a monthly status that all work streams have to follow. And basically what you see is, you see the phase first. Where are we? Are we in startup, implementation, or anchoring? Then what you see is the activity type. Is this related to application? Then it's Brian. Is this related to change? Then it's Tabitha. Then you see if it's something that we need to track. Of course, we do loads of things that do not necessarily need a report, but that we still want them to do in one way or the other. Then we have milestones. Milestones are basically activities. Each of them have a template. Each of them have things, activities that you need to do. There's no way around it. Everyone is doing it the exact same way. And we're doing that because we spent 2 years in people saying, I'm the best project manager, and then they screwed it up. So trust this out. This is the stick. They need to do it one way, and that's our way. That said, we also acknowledge that this is difficult. People think they're good at stakeholder management, but they're not. So of course we need to help them as well. So to be able to do that, we created a change team. That means that each work stream have a business application. That's on Brian's side, that's the technical part. And then they have a change lead that is driving the change process, ensuring that they understand what it is that they need to do and that they actually do what they need to do. That also means that we actually facilitate a lot of the things that they need to do. We take ownership of the process. They are accountable, so they still own the process. We are responsible. And that's the concept that we work with constantly. Accountability, responsibility. So like I said, there are different things that they need to go through. There's stakeholder wheels, there's stakeholder mapping, etc. End users do not come in the end, they come in the beginning. Small stuff like that will just ensure that when you're doing a successful launch in the end, then you're actually also making sure that the people who are supposed to use the system understand it and acknowledge it and accept it. At least that is the idea. Good. So these are some of the things that we are doing and the way that we have been driving this for the last few years. We also have some key learnings we just wanted to give you here in the end.
Yeah. And I think it's related to everything we've actually said, because as Jakob said, started out talking about our governance and that we actually have, senior leadership in our steering committee, meaning they can actually make decisions and those decisions will, be followed through. So extremely strong governance, have a clear commitment from the beginning that this is actually what we want to do. And I would also say keep reminding them that they actually said this was what they wanted to do. So continue that process. I would also say we should, you should consider this internal center of excellence because you truly need to understand what it is you're implementing. So it will require that you actually invest and that you create a team and you get your hands dirty with what this application can and cannot do. It will also put you in a much better position to actually discuss with MetricStream around the capabilities as such, because we have several times pushed back and say, well, we've actually tried this, we've done this, it doesn't work. It gives you a much better position on this. And once you've rolled it out, you actually have the team in place to maintain it. So what we do right now is we have 80% of our capacity on the development side, we have 20% on maintenance on the stuff we already rolled out. So there is a process already making sure that we do continuous updates on this. We have a process with MetricStream. If we've set something up, we send it to them for validations before we move it into our UAT environment. And they say, yep, this is actually upgrade safe, good to go. Okay, then we move it over. But we still run it through our testing processes. We have our automated testing so we can do regression. So do this, truly understand what the application can do, get your own hands dirty and manage it. And then whatever Jakob was saying here at the end around the change management, you actually start with that before you do anything else. Figure out what is really the scope of this. Who are the stakeholders? How do we get them involved? So begin with the end in mind, bringing in the people to begin with, bring them into discussion, have them look into this at early stage and say, what does it actually mean for us when we implement this? Business impact analysis. And that's just not one. That is for each business area to understand what does this change mean for us. It's not like from here to here. It's from all these places to one place. So all of them will have their own journey. So you need to start out with this. And they need to get that from the beginning. And they need to be mapped out, which is what we've created this change initiative to manage.
Thank you all. That's it.